Hello. Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. I'm Charlotte, and this is Quarantine Story Time. I can wave like a human being. This is Quarantine Story Time. We've been reading War and Peace. While most of America and a lot of the world has been sheltering in place, thought we'd dig into a classic, very long piece of literature. So, welcome back to those who have been staying tuned. And if this is your first time, welcome. Check out my channel. There is a playlist with all of the readings so you can catch up. If this is your first time, you can catch up on any of the story. Because there's too much character development and intrigue and history and court matters to try to recap every time. I will tell you what happened last time is that we read through the ball at the Dutch ambassador's house, where Sonia and Natasha and the Rostovs went, and this was sort of a very debut moment for young Natasha, where she danced with Prince Andrei, and he has remembered her fondly and has started to visit their house more, and it appears has some sort of affection for her. He's also become slightly disenchanted with the sovereign Alexander's right-hand man, Speransky. He looked up to him for a long time, and then he's kind of become slowly disenchanted as he realizes he's just a man like everyone else. My hair is not as even as I would like. Sorry. And the last thing that happened is the Rostovs' oldest daughter, Vera, and her new husband, the military man Berg, had a little soiree at their house. And they're kind of funny because they just want everything to look just like everyone else, in the way that so many of us do. Like, we just want to be like everyone else, just trying to keep up with the Joneses. And at their little soiree, she tried to hint to Prince Andrei about his affection for Natasha, and Pierre even noticed Natasha's reaction to Prince Andrei being around. So we'll see how that plays out. And that is basically where we left it. So section 22, just so you guys know, always check out the descriptions. I've been posting different links, and a lot of it's still the same. I don't think I've put anything up new since yesterday. But links of ways so we can be involved, supporting rather combating racial injustice in America. I would like to say supporting an end to it. I'm sure it'll be a long time before there's an end to racial injustice in America, if ever. I mean, we all always have biases that we live with. But I think the important part is all of us taking time to challenge ourselves, to challenge our biases. I know I have them. There's things that I picked up through growing up as a child that I thought meant everything was a certain way. And it's always very humbling and painful even to confront those things. And I know I'm trying to confront those in my life. And I would just encourage everyone to do the same. And I think that's something we should all be able to agree on is helpful, to always be challenging oneself and trying to empathize with people we don't understand or we disagree with, which can be really hard. So, and at the same time, taking a stand against things that are not right. So yeah, that's where we're at. So I try to post some links in the description of my video with different resources to take advantage of to that end. And tomorrow we will not be reading because it's Juneteenth, so we'll be celebrating Juneteenth. As a Memorial Day we didn't read, I will be celebrating Juneteenth. And I know there's marches and different things that you can be a part of. So check those out. Consider supporting your local community and their celebration of Juneteenth, which is a celebration of freedom in America Much in the same way that like you would celebrate freedom of July 4th, Juneteenth is about the emancipation of the Black slaves in America. So I think it's an important thing to celebrate. And for everyone who doesn't ever want to forget our history, I think it's an important thing to celebrate for that point as well. So again, we won't be having a reading tomorrow. And so after this, I'll see you guys on Monday. But before we even get there, let's continue reading. I have, we're in volume 2, part 3, section 22. The next day, Prince Andrei went to the Rostovs for dinner, as Count Ilya Andreevich had invited him and spent the whole day with them. Everyone in the house sensed for whose sake Prince Andrei had come, and he, without concealing it, tried to be with Natasha the whole day. Not only in Natasha's soul, frightened but happy and enraptured, but in all the house there was a sense of fear in the face of something important that was about to be accomplished. The Countess looked at Prince Andrei with her sad and sternly serious eyes as he talked with Natasha, and timidly pretended to begin some insignificant conversation as soon as he turned to look at her. Sonia was afraid to leave Natasha and afraid of being a nuisance when she was with them. Natasha turned pale from fearful expectation when she was left alone with him for a moment. Prince Andrei amazed her by his timidity. She felt that he had to tell her something, but could not resolve to do it. When Prince Andrei left in the evening, the Countess went over to Natasha and said in a whisper, "Well?" "Mama, for God's sake, don't ask me anything now. It's impossible to talk about it," said Natasha. But in spite of that, Natasha, now excited, now frightened, her eyes staring, lay for a long time in her mother's bed that evening. She told her how he had praised her, and then how he had said he would be going abroad, and then had asked where they would spend the summer, and then how he had asked her about Boris. "But nothing like this has ever happened to me before," she said. "Only I'm frightened. I'm always frightened with him. What does it mean? It means it's something real, doesn't it?" "Mama, are you asleep?" "No, dearest, I'm frightened myself," her mother replied. "Go." "I won't sleep anyways. How stupid it is to sleep. Mama, nothing like this has happened ever to me," she repeated with astonishment and fear before the feeling she was aware of within her. Who could have thought? It seemed to Natasha that when she had first seen Prince Andrei in Otrádnoe, she had fallen in love with him, and she was as if frightened by this strange, unexpected happiness, that the one she had already chosen then, she was firmly convinced of it, that same one had now met her again and seemed to be indifferent to her. Why did he come to Petersburg precisely now when we're here? Why did we have to meet at that ball? It's all fate. It's clearly fate. Everything has been leading up to it. Back then, when I'd only just seen him, I felt something special. What else did he say to you? There were some verses. Read them, her mother said pensively, asking about the verses that Prince Andrei had written in Natasha's album. Mama, is it not shameful that he's a widower? Enough, Natasha. Praise to God. Les mariages se font dans les cieux. Marriages are made in heaven. Mama, darling, how I love you. How good I feel, Natasha cried, shedding tears of happiness and excitement and embracing her mother. At the same time, Andrei was sitting with Pierre, telling him of his love for Natasha and of his firm intention to marry her. That evening there was a reception at Countess Elena Vasilievna's. There was the French ambassador. There was a prince who had lately become a frequent visitor to the Countess's house. And there were many brilliant ladies and gentlemen. Pierre came downstairs, strolled through the rooms, struck all the guests by his concentratedly distracted and gloomy look. Since the time of the ball, Pierre had been feeling in himself the approach of an attack of hypochondria and had been making desperate efforts to fight it off. Since the time of his wife's closeness to the prince, Pierre had been unexpectedly granted the rank of gentleman of the chamber, and since that time he had begun to feel the burden and shame of grand society, and his former gloomy thoughts about the vanity of all human things had begun to visit him more often. At the same time, the feeling he had noticed between his protege Natasha and Prince Andrei, his contrasting of his own position with that of his friend, intensified this gloomy mood still more. He tried equally to avoid thoughts of his wife and of Natasha and Prince Andrei. Again, everything seemed insignificant to him compared with eternity. Again, with the question, what for, presented itself. And he made himself work day and night over Masonic writings, hoping to ward off the approaching evil spirit. Towards midnight, having left the Countess's rooms, Pierre was sitting at his desk upstairs in the low-ceilinged, smoke-filled study, wearing a shabby dressing gown, copying the original Scottish charters, when someone came into his room. It was Prince Andrei. "Ah, it's you," said Pierre, with a distracted and displeased air. "And here I am working," he said, pointing to his notebook, with that look of escaping from life's adversities with which unhappy people look at their work. Prince Andrei, with a radiant, rapturous face, renewed towards life, stopped before Pierre and noticed his sad face, smiled at him with the egoism of happiness. "Well, dear heart," he said, "I wanted to tell you yesterday, and I've come to tell you today. I've never experienced anything like it. I'm in love, my friend." Pierre suddenly sighed deeply, dropped his heavy body onto the sofa beside Prince Andrei. "With Natasha Rostov, is it?" he said. Yes, who else? I never have believed it, but this strange feeling is stronger than I am. Yesterday I was tormented, I suffered, and I wouldn't trade that torment with anything in the world. I've never lived before, only now I am alive, but I can't live without her. But can she love me? I'm too old for her. Why don't you speak?" What was I telling you?" Pierre said suddenly, getting up and beginning to pace the room. "I've always thought so. This girl is such a treasure, she's a rare girl. My friend, I beg you, don't be clever, don't doubt. Marry, and I'm sure there'll be no man happier than you. But she loves you. Don't talk nonsense," said Prince Andrei, smiling and looking into Pierre's eyes. "She loves you, and I know it," Pierre shouted angrily. "No, listen," said Prince Andrei, stopping him by the arm. "Can you know what state I'm in? I must tell it all to somebody." Well, talk. I'm very glad," said Pierre, and indeed his face changed, the furrows smoothed out, and he listened joyfully to Prince Andrei. Prince Andrei seemed quite a different man. Where was his anguish, his contempt for life, his disillusionment? Pierre was the only man before whom he would venture to speak himself out. Pierre was the only man before whom he would venture to speak himself out. But then he spoke everything that was in his heart. First, he lightly and boldly made plans far into the future, saying how he could not sacrifice his happiness to his father's whim, how he would make his father agree to this marriage and love her, or else he would do without his consent. Then he was astonished at some strange alien, independent of him, at the feeling that possessed him. "I wouldn't have believed it if someone had told me I could love her so much," said Prince Andrei. "It was quite a different feeling from what I knew before. The whole world is divided for me into two parts. One is she, and there is all happiness, light, hope. The other is where she is not, and everything is dejection and darkness." "Darkness and gloom," Pierre repeated. Yes, I understand that. "I can't help loving the light. It's not my fault, and I'm very happy. Do you understand me? I know you're glad for me." Yes, Pierre agreed, looking at his friend with tender and sad eyes. The brighter Prince Andrei's fate seemed to him, the gloomier seemed his own. Section 23. For marriage he needed his father's consent, and for that Prince Andrei set off the next day to see his father. The father received his son's communication with outward calm, but with inner spite. He could not understand why anyone would want to change his life, to introduce anything new into it, when for him life was already over. "Only let me live out my life as I want, and then they can do what they want," the old man said to himself. With his son, however, he used the diplomacy he made use of on important occasions. Assuming a calm tone, he discussed the whole matter. First, the marriage was not a brilliant one in terms of family, wealth, and distinction. Second, Prince Andrei was not in his early youth, and his health was weak. The old man especially emphasized that, while she was very young. Third, there was his son, and it would be a pity to hand him over to a young girl. Fourth, and finally, the old man said with a mocking glance at his son, "I beg you to put the matter off for a year. Go abroad. Take a cure. Look, as you want to, for a German tutor for Prince Nikolai. And then, if this love, passion, obstinacy, whatever you want to call it, is so great, you can marry. And that is my last word. Be it known to you, my last," the prince concluded, in a tone which showed that nothing would make him change his decision. Prince Andrei saw clearly that the old man hoped that either his feeling or his future bride's would not endure the test of time, or that he, the old prince, would die himself before then, and decided to do his father's will, to propose and to put off the wedding for a year. Exactly 3 weeks after his last evening at the Rostovs, Prince Andrei returned to Petersburg. The day after her talk with her mother, Natasha waited the whole day for Bolkonsky, but he did not come. On the next day and the third it was the same. Pierre also did not come, and Natasha, not knowing that Prince Andrei had gone to see his father, could not explain his absence. 3 weeks went by. Natasha did not want to go anywhere, and like a shadow, idle and dejected, wandered through the rooms. In the evenings wept in secret from everybody, and did not go to her mother. She blushed constantly and was irritable. It seemed to her that everyone knew about her disappointment, was laughing at her, and pitied her. With all the strength of her inner grief, this grief of vanity intensified her unhappiness. One day she came to the Countess, was about to say something to her, and suddenly began to cry. Her tears were tears of an offended child who does not know why it is being punished. The Countess began to calm Natasha. Natasha first listened to her mother's words, then suddenly interrupted her. "Stop it, Mama, I'm not thinking, and I don't want to think. So he came, and then stopped, and then stopped." Her voice trembled, and she almost began to cry, but controlled herself and calmly went on. "I don't want to get married at all, and I'm afraid of him. I'm calm now, completely calm." The day after this conversation, Natasha put on that old dress, which was especially known for making her cheerful in the mornings, and with that morning began her former way of life, which she had abandoned since the ball. After having tea, she went to the reception room, which she especially liked for its strong resonance, and began to sing her solfeggio, singing exercises. Having finished the first exercise, she stopped in the middle of the room and repeated a musical phrase which she especially liked. She listened joyfully, as if it was unexpected for her, to the loveliness with which these sounds, rippling, filled the whole emptiness of the room and slowly died away, and she suddenly felt cheerful. "Why, think about it. Things are good as it is," she said to herself, and began walking up and down the room, not simply stepping on the resounding parquet, but beginning each step on the heel. She was wearing new shoes that she liked. Then going to the toe, and listening joyfully as she had to the sound of her voice, to the rhythmic stamping of the heel and the creaking of the toe. Going past a mirror, she looked into it. "Here I am," the expression of her face seemed to say at the sight of her. "And that's good. I don't need anybody." A servant wanted to come in to straighten something in the room, but she did not let him in, and closing the door behind him, went back to her walk. That morning she returned again to her favorite state of love and admiration of herself. "How lovely that Natasha is," she said to herself again, in the words of some collective male third person. "Pretty, a good voice, young, and doesn't bother anybody, only leave her in peace." But however much she was left in peace, she could no longer be at peace, and she felt it at once. In the front hall, the outside door opened. Someone asked, "Are they at home?" And someone's footsteps were heard. Natasha was looking in the mirror, but did not see herself. She was listening to the sounds in the front hall. When she did see herself, her face was pale. It was he. She knew it for certain, though she had barely heard the sound of his voice through the closed door. Pale and frightened, Natasha ran into the drawing room. "Mama, Bolkonsky's here," she said. "Mama, it's terrible. It's unbearable. I don't want to suffer. What am I to do?" Before the Countess had time to reply, Prince Andrei, with an anxious and serious face, came into the drawing room. As soon as he saw Natasha, his face lit up. He kissed the Countess's and Natasha's hand and sat down near the sofa. "It is long since we've had the pleasure," the Countess began, but Prince Andrei interrupted her, answering her question and obviously hurrying to say what he had to. "I haven't called on you all this time because I was at my father's. I had to discuss a very important matter. I came back only last night," he said, glancing at Natasha. "I must speak with you, Countess," he added after a moment's silence. The Countess, with a deep sigh, lowered her eyes. "I am at your service," she said. Natasha knew she must leave, but she could not do it. Something clenched her throat, and she looked at Prince Andrei impolitely, directly, with wide open eyes. "Now, this minute? No, it can't be," she thought. He glanced at her again, and then this glance convinced her that she was not mistaken. Yes, her fate was decided, now, this minute. "Go, Natasha, I'll call you," the Countess said in a whisper. Natasha glanced at Prince Andrei and her mother with frightened, pleading eyes, and went on. "I have come, Countess, to ask for your daughter's hand," said Prince Andrei. The Countess's face blushed, but she said nothing. "Your proposal," the Countess began gravely. He was silent, looking into her eyes. "Your proposal," she began, embarrassed, "is pleasing to us, and I accept your proposal. I am glad. My husband, too, I hope, but it depends on her." "I'll tell her once I have your consent. Will you give it to me?" asked Prince Andrei. "Yes," said the Countess, and she gave him her hand and pressed her lips to his forehead with a mixed feeling of alienation and tenderness when he bent over her hand. She wished to love him as a son, but she felt that for her he was an alien and frightening man. "I'm sure my husband will consent," the Countess said, "but your father—" My father, whom I told of my plans, made it an absolute condition for his consent that the marriage not take place for a year, and I wanted to tell you that," said Prince Andrei. "It's true that Natasha is still young, but so long." "It cannot be otherwise," Prince Andrei said with a sigh. "I'll send her to you," said the Countess, and she left the room. "Lord, have mercy on us," she repeated as she was looking for her daughter. Sonia said that Natasha was in her bedroom. Natasha was sitting on her bed, pale, dry-eyed, looking at the icon and whispering something, crossing herself quickly. Seeing her mother, she jumped up and rushed to her. "What, Mamma? What?" Go to him. He's asking for your hand," the Countess said coldly, as it seemed to Natasha. Go, the mother said, sadly and reproachfully after her running daughter, and she sighed deeply. Natasha did not remember how she entered the drawing room. Going through the door and seeing him, she stopped. "Can it be that this stranger has now become everything to me?" she asked herself, and instantly answered, "Yes, everything. He alone is now dearer to me than anything in the world." Prince Andrei went up to her with lowered eyes. "I loved you the moment I saw you. May I hope?" He glanced at her, and the serious passion in the expression of her face struck him. Her face asked, "Why ask? Why doubt what you cannot help knowing? Why speak when it's impossible to put everything you feel into words?" She came closer to him and stopped. He took her hand and kissed it. "Do you love me?" Yes, said Natasha. Yes, said Natasha, as if with vexation, sighed loudly, and then again, and burst into sobs. "Why, what's the matter?" "I'm so happy," she replied, smiling through her tears, leaned closer to him, thought for a second, as if asking herself whether she could, and kissed him. Prince Andrei held her hand, looked into her eyes, and did not find the former love for her in his soul. Something suddenly turned over in his soul. The former poetic and mysterious delight of desire was not there, but there was a pity for her woman's and child's weakness. There was fear before her devotion and trust, a heavy but at the same time joyful consciousness of duty that bound him to her forever. The actual feeling, though not as bright and poetic as the former one, was more serious and strong. "Did Maman tell you that it can't be sooner than a year?" Prince Andrei asked, looking into her eyes. Can it be me, that baby girl, as everyone said of me, thought Natasha? Can it be that from this moment on, I'm a wife, equal to this strange, dear, intelligent man, whom even my father respects? Can it be true that now there is no more toying with life, that I'm grown up now, that responsibility is laid upon me now for every deed and word? What was it, he asked me. No, she replied, but she did not understand what he was asking. Forgive me, said Prince Andrei, but you're so young, and I've already experienced so much of life. I fear for you. You don't know yourself. Natasha listened with concentrated attention, trying to understand the meaning of his words and not understanding. Hard as this year that postpones my happiness will be for me, said Prince Andrei went on. During this time you will test yourself. I ask you to make me happy in a year, but you're free. Our engagement will remain a secret, and if you become convinced that you don't love me, or that you love, Prince Andrei said with an unnatural smile. Why are you saying this? Natasha interrupted him. You know I've loved you from the very day you first came to Otradno, she said, firmly convinced that she was speaking the truth. In a year you will know yourself. A whole year, said Natasha suddenly, only now understanding that the wedding was postponed for a year. But why a year? Why a year? Prince Andrei began to explain to her the reasons for this postponement. Natasha did not listen to him. And it can't be otherwise? She asked. Prince Andrei said nothing, but his face expressed the impossibility of changing his decision. It's terrible. No, it's terrible, Natasha said suddenly, and sobbed again. I'll die waiting a year. It's impossible. It's terrible. She looked into her fiancé's face and saw there an expression of compassion and bewilderment. No, I'll do it all, she said suddenly, stopping her tears. I'm so happy. Her father and mother came into the room and blessed the betrothed couple. From that day on, Prince Andrei began going to the Rostovs as a fiancé. Section 24. There was no formal betrothal, nor was anyone told of the engagement of Bolkonsky and Natasha. Prince Andrei insisted on that. He said that, as he was the cause of the delay, he would bear all the burden of it. He said that he had forever bound himself by his word, but that he did not want to bind Natasha and give her full freedom. If in 6 months she felt that she did not love him, she would be within her rights to refuse him. Of course, it went without saying that neither the parents nor Natasha wanted to hear about it, but Prince Andrei insisted on having his way. Prince Andrei came to the Rostovs every day, but he did not behave like a fiancé with Natasha. He addressed her formally and kissed only her hand. Between Prince Andrei and Natasha, after the day of the proposal, close and simple relations were established, quite different from before. It was as if they had not known each other until then. He and she both liked to remember how they had looked at each other when they were still nothing. Now they both felt themselves completely different beings. Then they had been false, now they were simple and sincere. At first there was a feeling of awkwardness in the family in dealing with Prince Andrei. He seemed a man from an alien world, and Natasha spent a long time getting the household accustomed to Prince Andrei, and proudly assured them all that he only seemed so peculiar, but that he was the same as everyone else, and that she was not afraid of him, and that no one should be afraid of him. After a few days, the family got used to him, and without restraint carried on their usual way of life in which he participated. He was able to talk about estate management with the Count, about dresses with the Countess, and Natasha about albums and embroidery with Sonia. Occasionally, the Rostov household expressed surprise among themselves and in Prince Andrei's presence at how it had all happened and how obvious the portents of it had been. Prince Andrei coming to Otrudno, their coming to Petersburg, the resemblance between Natasha and Prince Andrei, which the nanny had noticed during Prince Andrei's first visit, and the clash between Andrei and Nikolai in 1805, and many other portents of what had happened were noted by the household. In the house, that poetic boredom and silence reigned which always accompanied the presence of an engaged couple. Often, while sitting together, they all fell silent. Sometimes they all got up and left, and the couple, alone together, were still just as silent. They rarely spoke of their future life. Prince Andrei was afraid and embarrassed to speak of it. Natasha shared the feeling, as she did all his feelings, which she invariably guessed. Once Natasha began to ask about his son. Prince Andrei blushed, which often happened to him now, and which Natasha especially liked, and said that his son would not live with them. "Why not?" Natasha asked in alarm. "I cannot take him from his grandfather. And then, too, how I love him," said Natasha, guessing his thought at once. "But I know that you want there to be no pretext for blaming yourself or me." The old count sometimes went up to Prince Andrei, kissed him, and asked his advice about Petya's education or Nikolai's service. The old countess sighed, looking at them. Sonia feared every moment to be in the way and tried to find pretexts for leaving them alone, when they did not even want it. When Prince Andrei spoke, he was a very good storyteller. Natasha listened to him with pride. When she spoke, she noticed with fear and joy that he looked at her attentively and searchingly. She asked herself in perplexity, "What is he looking for in me? What is he seeing with his eyes? What if it's what he's looking for isn't in me?" Sometimes she got into her wildly merry state, and then she especially liked to hear and see how Prince Andrei laughed. He laughed rarely, but when he did, he gave himself wholly to his laughter, and each time after this laughter, she felt closer to him. Natasha would be perfectly happy if the thought of the imminent and approaching separation had not frightened her. On the eve of his departure from Petersburg, Prince Andrei brought along Pierre, who had not once been to the Rostovs since the time of the ball. Pierre looked perplexed and embarrassed. He was talking with the mother. Natasha sat down with Sonia by the chess table, thereby inviting Prince Andrei to join her. He went over to them. "You've known Bezukov for a long time, haven't you?" he asked. "Do you like him?" "Yes, he's very nice, but very funny." And, as always, when she spoke of Pierre, she began telling anecdotes about his absent-mindedness, anecdotes which had even been made up about him. "You know I've entrusted him with our secret," said Prince Andrei. "I've known him since childhood. He has a heart of gold. I beg you, Natalie," he suddenly said earnestly. "I'm going away. God knows what may happen. You may stop love. Well, I know I mustn't talk about that. One thing, whatever happens with you while I'm not here." "What's going to happen?" "Whatever misfortune there may be," Prince Andrei went on, "I beg you, Mademoiselle Sophie, whatever may happen, turn to him alone for advice and help. He's the most absent-minded and ridiculous man, but he has a heart of gold." Neither her father and mother, nor Sonia, nor Prince Andrei himself could have foreseen how parting with her fiancé would affect Natasha. Flushed and agitated, her eyes dry, she wandered about the house that day, occupying herself with the most insignificant things, as if not understanding what awaited her. She did not cry when, at the moment of taking leave of her, he kissed her hand for the last time. "Don't leave," was all she said to him, in a voice that made him wonder whether he ought indeed to stay, and which he remembered long afterwards. When he was gone, she also did not cry, but for several days she sat, not crying, in her room, not interested in anything, and only saying from time to time, "Ah, why did he go?" But 2 weeks after his departure, just as unexpectedly for those around her, she recovered from her moral illness and became the same as before, only with a changed moral physiognomy, as children get up with a different face after a prolonged illness. Section 25. The health and character of Prince Nikolai Andreevich Bolkonsky during that last year after his son's departure declined considerably. He became still more irritable than before, and all the outbursts of his groundless wrath fell mainly upon Princess Marya. He seemed to carefully seek out all her sorest spots so as to torment her morally as cruelly as possible. Princess Marya had two passions and therefore two joys, her nephew Nikolushka and religion, and the two were the favorite topics of the prince's attacks and mockery. Whatever the talk was about, he always brought the conversation down to the superstitions of old maids or to the pampering and spoiling of children. "You want to make Nikolushka into an old maid like yourself. You shouldn't. Prince Andrei needs a son, not an old maid," he would say. Or, turning to Mademoiselle Bourrienne, he would ask, in front of Princess Marya, how she liked our priests and icons, and would joke. He insulted Princess Marya constantly and painfully, but his daughter did not even have to force herself to forgive him. How could he be guilty before her, and how could her father, who, she knew all the same, loved her, be unjust to her? And what is justice? The princess never thought about this proud word, justice. All the complicated laws of mankind were concentrated for her in one simple and clear law, the law of love and self-denial taught to us by him who suffered for mankind with love, though he himself was God. What did the justice or injustice of other people matter to her? She herself had to suffer and to love, and that's what she did. In the winter, Prince Andrei came to Bald Hills, and was cheerful, meek, and affectionate, as Princess Marya had not seen him for a long time. She sensed that something had happened to him. But he said nothing to Princess Marya about his love. Before his departure, Prince Andrei had a long talk about something with his father, and Princess Marya noticed that before his departure, they were both displeased with each other. Soon after Prince Andrei's departure, Princess Marya wrote to Petersburg from Bald Hills to her friend Julie Kerrigan, whom Princess Marya had dreamed, as girls always do, of marrying to her brother, and who at that time was in mourning on the occasion of the death of her brother, killed in Turkey. "Sorrows are clearly our common lot, my dear and tender friend Julie. Your loss is so terrible that I cannot explain it to myself otherwise than as a special mercy of God, who loving you wants to test you and your excellent mother. Ah, my friend, religion and religion alone can, I do not say comfort, but deliver us from despair. Religion alone can explain to us that which man cannot understand without its help. Therefore, why kind and lofty beings who know how to find happiness in life, who not only harm no one but are necessary for the happiness of others, are called to God, while the evil, the useless, the harmful, or such as are a burden to themselves and to others, are left to live. The first death I saw, which I will never forget, the death of my dear sister-in-law, made that impression on me. Just as you asked fate why your wonderful brother had to die, so I used to ask why this angel, Lisa, had to die, who not only did no wrong to anyone, but never had anything but kind thoughts in her soul. And what then, my friend? 5 years have gone by, and I, with my small mind, am now beginning to understand clearly why she had to die, and in what way this death was the expression of the infinite goodness of the Creator, of all of whose actions, though for the most part we do not understand them, are nothing but manifestations of his infinite love for his creation. It may be, I often think, that she was too angelically innocent to have the strength to bear all the duties of a mother. She was irreproachable as a young wife. Perhaps she could not have been so as a mother. Now she has not only left us, and Prince Andrei especially, with the purest regret and memory, but she will probably obtain that place which I dare not hope for myself. But, not to speak only of her, this early and terrible death, despite all our grieving, has the most beneficent beneficent influence on me and on my brother. Then, at the moment of loss, these thoughts could not have come to me. Then I would have driven them away with horror, but now it is so clear and unquestionable. I am writing all this to you, my friend, only so as to convince you of the gospel truth that has become life's truth for me. Not a single hair will fall from our heads without his will, and his will is guided only by his boundless love for us, and therefore everything that happens to us, everything is for our own good. You ask whether we shall spend next winter in Moscow. Despite all my wish to see you, I do not think so, and I do not wish to. And you will be surprised to learn that the reason for it is Bonaparte, and here's why. My father's health has noticeably declined. He cannot bear to be contradicted. He becomes irritated. This irritation, as you know, is mostly turned towards political affairs. He cannot bear the thought that Bonaparte deals as an equal with all the sovereigns of Europe, and especially with ours, the grandson of the great Catherine. As you know, I am totally indifferent to political affairs, but from my father's words and from his conversation with Mikhail Ivanovich, I know all that is happening in the world, especially all the honors rendered Bonaparte, who it seems, only in Bald Hills of all places in the world, is not recognized as a great man, still less as the French emperor. My father cannot bear that. It seems to me that my father, mostly owing to his view of political affairs and foreseeing the clashes he will have, owing to his manner of voicing his opinion without restraint, is reluctant to speak of going to Moscow. All that he gains from treatment he will lose owing to his arguments about Bonaparte, which are inevitable. In any case, this will be decided very soon. Our family life goes on as before, except for the absence of my brother André. As I've already written to you, he has changed very much recently. After his grief, it is only now, during this present year, that he has completely revived morally. He has become the way I knew him as a child, kind, affectionate, with the heart of gold of which I do not know it's the equal. He has understood, it seems to me, that his life is not over, but along with this moral change he has grown very weak physically. He has become thinner than before, more nervous. I fear for him, and I'm glad he has undertaken this trip abroad which the doctors prescribed for him long ago. I hope this will cure him. You write me that he is spoken of in Petersburg as one of the most active, educated, and intelligent young men. Forgive my family vanity, but I never doubted that. It's impossible to calculate the good he has done here for everyone, from his peasants to the gentry. On coming to Petersburg, he only received his due. I wonder how rumors generally get from Petersburg to Moscow, and especially such false ones as the one you write me about, the rumor of the supposed marriage of my brother to the little Rostov girl. I do not think André will ever marry anyone, and especially not her. And here is why. First, I know that, though he rarely speaks of his late wife, the grief of that loss is too deeply rooted in his heart for him to ever decide to give her a successor and a stepmother to our little angel. Second, because as far as I know, this girl does not belong at all to the category that would please André. I do not think that Prince André would choose her for his wife, and I will tell you frankly, I do not wish it. But I am babbling away, coming to the end of my second sheet. Goodbye, my dear friend. May God keep you under his holy and mighty protection. My dear friend, Mademoiselle Bourrienne kisses you. Marie. Section 26. In the middle of summer, Princess Maria received an unexpected letter from Prince André in Switzerland, with a strange and unexpected piece of news. Prince André announced his engagement to Miss Rostov. His whole letter breathed of loving rapture for his fiancée and a tender friendship and trust for his sister. He wrote that he had never loved as he had loved now, and that only now did he know and understand life. He asked his sister to forgive him for not telling her of this decision during his visit to Bald Hills, though he had spoken of it with his father. He had not told her because Princess Maria would have asked their father to give his consent, and without achieving that goal would have irritated their father and brought upon herself the whole burden of his displeasure. However, he wrote, the matter had not been as finally decided then as it was now. Then father appointed me a year's term, and now 6 months, half the appointed term, have gone by, and I remain as firm in my decision as ever. If the doctor did not keep me here at the spa, I would be in Russia myself, but as it is, I must put off my return for another 3 months. You know me and my relations with father. I need nothing from him. I am and always will be independent, but to go against his will, to incur his wrath, when he will perhaps not be with us much longer, would spoil half my happiness. I am now writing a letter to him about the same thing, and I ask you to choose a good moment to give him the letter, and to let him know how he looks at all and to let me know how he looks at it all, and whether there is any hope he will agree to shorten the term by 3 months. After many hesitations, doubts, and prayers, Princess Marya gave her father the letter. The next day, the old prince calmly told her, "Write your brother that he should wait till I die. It won't be long. I'll soon unbind him." The princess was about to make some objection, but her father did not let her, and began raising his voice more and more. "Mary, Mary, dear boy, they're of good stock. Clever people, eh? Right. Rich, eh? Yes, a fine stepmother for Nikolushka. Write him that he can marry tomorrow even. She'll be Nikolushka's stepmother, and I'll marry little Bourien. Ha, ha, ha. So he won't be without a stepmother himself. Only one thing, there's no need for more women in my house. Let him marry and live separately. Maybe you'll move in with him." He turned to Princess Marya. "God help you, and good riddance. Good riddance." After this outburst, the prince never once spoke of the matter again. But his suppressed vexation with his son's faint-heartedness showed itself in the relation between father and daughter. To the previous subjects of mockery, a new one was added, talk about stepmothers and his amiability towards Mademoiselle Bourien. "Why shouldn't I marry her?" he said to his daughter. "She'll make a nice princess." And lately, to her perplexity and astonishment, Princess Marya began noticing that the father had indeed become more and more intimate with the Frenchwoman. Princess Marya wrote to Prince Andrei about how their father had taken his letter, but she comforted her brother, giving him hope of reconciling their father to the thought. Nikolushka and his upbringing, Andrei. Nikolushka and his upbringing, Andrei, and religion were Princess Marya's comforts and joys. But besides that, since every human being needs his personal hope, Princess Marya had, in the deepest recesses of her soul, a hidden dream and hope, which provided the main comfort for her life. This comforting dream and hope was given her by the people of God, the fools for Christ and wanderers who visited her in secret from the old prince. The longer Princess Marya lived, the more of her life she experienced and observed, the more astonished she was at the short-sightedness of people who thought pleasure and happiness here on earth, who worked, suffered, struggled, and did evil to each other to achieve this impossible, illusory, and fallacious happiness. Prince Andrei loved his wife. She dies. It's not enough for him. He wants to bind up his happiness with another woman. Father doesn't want it because he wants a more aristocratic and wealthy marriage for Andrei. They all struggle and suffer and torment and ruin their souls, their eternal souls, to achieve blessings that last a moment. Not only do we know it ourselves, Christ, the Son of God, came down to earth and told us that this life is a momentary life, a trial, yet we keep holding on to it and hope to find happiness in it. How is it no one understands that, thought Princess Marya. No one except these contemptible people of God who come to me at the back door with bags over their shoulders, afraid of being noticed by the prince, not because they would suffer from him, but so as not to lead him into sin. To leave family, birthplace, all cares for worldly goods, so as to walk without clinging to anything, in coarse rags under an assumed name from place to place, without harming people and praying for them, praying for those who persecute and for those who protect. There is no truth and life higher than this truth and life. There was one woman wanderer, Fedosyushka, a 50-year-old, small, quiet, pockmarked woman who had been walking barefoot and in chains for 30 years already. Princess Marya had a special love for her. Once, when in the dark room by the light of the icon lamp, Fedosyushka was telling about her life, the thought that Fedosyushka alone had the right way of life suddenly came to Princess Marya with such force that she herself decided to go wandering. When Fedosyushka went to bed, Princess Marya thought about it for a long time and finally decided that, however strange it was, she had to become a wanderer. She confided her attention only to her father confessor, the monk Akinfi, and the monk approved of it. Under the pretext of a gift for the wanderers, Princess Marya provided herself with a full wanderer's outfit: a shirt, bast shoes, a kaftan, and a black kerchief. Often, going to the secret chest, Princess Marya would pause, unable to decide whether the time had come to fulfill her intention. Often, listening to the stories of the women wanderers, she would become excited by their simple talk, mechanical for them, but full of deep meaning for her, so that several times she had been ready to drop everything and flee the house. In her imagination, she already saw herself and Fedosyushka in coarse rags, walking with a stick and a bag down a dusty road, guiding her wandering without envy, without love of human beings, without desire, from one holy place to the other, and in the end, the place where there is no sorrow or sighing, but eternal joy and bliss. I'll come to one place and pray. Before I have time to get used to it and love it, I'll go on, and I'll keep going on until my legs give out. I'll lie down and die somewhere, and come finally to that eternal, quiet heaven where there is no sorrow or sighing, thought Princess Marya. But then, seeing her father, and especially little Coco, her intention would weaken, and she would weep in quiet and feel she was a sinful woman. She loved her father and her nephew more than God. And that is the end of our reading for today. That is also the end of Volume 2, Part 3. So very exciting. We'll start Part 4 on Monday when we come back. And then there's Part 4 and Part 5 in Volume 2 until we are through Volume 2. And once we get through Volume 2, we'll be halfway done. So we're making great progress. Hopefully in the next week or two, we will be through that. Like I said in earlier and in previous videos, no reading tomorrow, celebration of Juneteenth. Yay! We'll be reading Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week at the same time. But I will probably need to post a different time for Thursday and Friday. But I'll keep you guys posted about time changes. So yeah, as you know, things start opening back up, I unfortunately will have responsibilities that I have to attend to, which will mean changing some times. But I'm sure we can find something that works for everyone, and maybe if I push it back later, we can even loop in friends from the West Coast or other time zones. So that'll be fun. There's a lot there, and I always find it interesting how Tolstoy's woven so much philosophy and just general like deep ponderings about life and about faith and love and the nature of things into the storytelling, in addition to, you know, the intrigues of court or the romance or the drama or the history. It's really quite an impressive book so far, and I'm really glad we've had the time to dig into it. So yeah, keep doing good out there, people. Continue to be humble. I know I need to be a little bit more humble in everything, but continue to be humble, loving, and caring, and stay safe. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great Juneteenth and a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Thanks.